Thanks all. What a fantastic turnout as well. Like, look at it. We weren't sure how many people would get here. Obviously, we're all very passionate about Carlisle Street. So thanks. Thank you, Sally, for having us here. Thank you to Bill as well, one of the lay ministers here. And thank you all for coming. I'm Justin Halliday, local resident of 20 years here in Balaclava and latterly in St Kilda East. And I'm also an election candidate in Elmer Ward, but don't hold that against me. And on behalf of BEST, which is the Balaclava Environment, Streets and Trees organisation, Jerry, Helen and myself, I welcome you all to our Carlisle Street Forum, and what a great turnout we have. First, I just want to also acknowledge some of the people we have in the room. We have several outgoing incumbent councillors here representing the current council. We have Tim and others. I'm not sure if we have anyone else actually. What's it? Just wait, they'll come back. And we have a whole bunch of council candidates here from Elmer Ward, from Balaclava and from other wards as well. So if you're a council candidate, just so people know where you are, can you just pop up your hand quickly? Okay, we almost outnumber you all, so we can take the audience if we have to, folks. Thank you all. Lastly, first, apologies as well. We have a few apologies. First, Heinz von Eckartsberg, who was the joint president of the Urban Design Forum, was going to be here speaking tonight. He was a late inclusion and a late exclusion, so unfortunately we don't have him, but we do have very esteemed speakers already, so you are in good hands. Second, we have apologies from Dick Gross, Alex Katz, Barney Moore and Rachel Polsky, all candidates as well, who send their apologies here tonight. And lastly, apologies as well to Andrew Hoyne, who runs a design practice here on Chapel Street, and he was one of the instigators of this whole forum. We started talking to Andrew when the proposal to sell the Coles car park came up on the council agenda about what we needed to do to stop another Woolworths sale happening so that it doesn't just drag on forever, how we can get, and when I say stop, I mean stop the outcome of that. We want to see development here, i.e. revitalisation of Carlisle Street. What we don't want to see is it languishing like it is. And the two supermarkets are some of the keys to that. They're locking up this land and preventing it from being activated. So we were talking with Andrew about what we could do, and this idea of a community forum came out so that we could inform the community of what's happening here in Carlisle Street. And as the new council comes in, have our voices, the community, heard by that new council, whoever it is, if they're in this room, hopefully, so that we get a great Carlisle Street out of these developments that are going to happen. And our goal is to gather experts to help us. We have the community, but we also have design and architectural experts as well, who can tell us what we can do or what we should expect as a community from this area. And we're all here because we love Carlisle Street. So, which is why it's kind of a shame to see it the way it is at the moment, where we have 25 to 30 empty shops. And this kind of feeling of malaise on the street. And this is in the context of a bigger picture here. We have changes to the way people shop, the way people live their lives. We have the post-COVID inflation spike that's driven up rents and caused a cost of living crisis and a housing crisis. We have the state government telling us that we in Port Phillip need to accommodate 56,000 more houses in the city of Port Phillip in the next 25 years. And we are sitting here adjacent to one of the key transport and activity hubs of the city of Port Phillip, and it's waiting there, kind of wasting as it is at the moment. So these are some of the things that are in the background of this discussion that you're hearing today. We also have, in this area, we have fantastic facilities. We have a town hall, we have schools, we have childcare, we have the station, we have the trams, we have the police station, and we have this land here that is at the hub of this that's going to be critical to revitalise Carlisle Street. So, and 4 years ago, council sold the land behind Woolworths to Woolworths. They sold it for about $6.5 million. And in the last 4 years, not much has happened there. And now we're at the cusp of selling the Coles land to Coles. And this can either unlock this activity or it can lock in, 4 more years of inactivity, and we can't afford, Carlisle Street Precinct can't afford, and us as a community can't afford 4 more years of inactivity in Carlisle Street. We need to get this revitalisation going in. So tonight we're going to talk about a few things. First, what is the current proposal to sell the land? What is council's land? What are they proposing to do? Second, who owns what in the area? So you'll get a good idea of what the land holdings are in this Carlisle Street Precinct. Third, we're going to hear from Dara about what has gone wrong in similar developments in other areas. So kind of a cautionary tale. From Danny, we're going to hear what are the great things that are happening in Carlisle Street and what great shopping strips have. What are the characteristics of those? And then from Carlos, we're also going to hear about what are some great developments. What could we hope for? What are some ways that we can achieve great outcomes out of this, as a community, as a council. But first up, I'm going to introduce Jerry McLaughlin, who's going to speak first. So I might do quick introductions and then we'll throw to you. Jerry McLaughlin, architect and senior urban designer, is going to speak first about what are the land holdings. And then we're going to hear from Dara O'Brien, who's principal architect at Evidence-Based Design. Then we're going to hear from Danny Vallon, who is a writer for The Age, food writer for The Age, and recent host of an event at Carlisle Street just last night. And then we're going to hear from Carlos Regis, who is a senior urban designer and planner from MGS Architects and the City of Melbourne. So that's our run sheet for tonight. We are going to get kicked off straight away with Jerry. So thank you. Welcome, Jerry.
Just to give you a bit of background on myself, I've spent a substantial part of my career working on urban renewal precincts across different parts of Melbourne, including Ringwood Transit City, which was over many years, involved many parts of government, many government departments, many corporate actors, including CIC, the redevelopment of Eastland. It's now complete and it's a really great success. Very comprehensive process. So I just want to give you a bit of an idea about where I come from. I'm also a house owner opposite the Coles car park, so I'm also an directly affected resident to the precinct and the changes that are likely to happen. So by complete chance, I happened to have a conversation with Helen at a funeral about what the council were discussing at a meeting on the 21st of August 2024, so some weeks ago, and an item 13.1, which was followed a very detailed discussion about dog parks late in the evening, was the item 13.1, which was a significant decision, a significant set of recommendations to council, which was going to be incredibly influential for Balaclava. On the screen now, you can see what those recommendations, and I'll come back to what they are. This is, in effect, the land that is owned by council. So it's 2 parcels of land that face Alfred Street and also Nelson Street, but also a road and 2 laneways. Now, those pieces of land is what is being proposed to be sold exclusively to Coles Proprietary Limited, or Coles Development Company. So Coles these days does an awful lot of developments which are involve substantial housing. So these recommendations, I just want to go into what they are. So there are two categories. One is the road and laneways, which comes under the Road Management Act and has different parts of the Local Government Act in terms of how those sales and in terms of how they need to be administratively dealt with. The land parcels come directly under the Local Government Act, so they have 2 different approaches that council have to go through. Council unanimously accepted those recommendations, unanimously. So this is what is locked in currently. The roadways and laneways, what council office will be starting in November or December, is to discontinue those roads and take them off the council register. As part of the public notice, they will nominate their intention to discontinue those roads, but also their intention to sell the roads exclusively to Coles. Now, how we're going to know, how that's publicly going to be known, is a is a public announcement in The Age. I don't know if any of you read The Age. Do you read it every day? Are you going to know about it? So that's one of the questions I have. How are people, how are those going to know that this is happening? The land parcels are also going to be by public notice, and I'll go into some detail. So, of course, I came away thinking, what does this all mean for us? So, this is in fact a diagram of who owns what. I know on the screen it's not that big, but the yellow refers to the land that council sold to Woolworths 4 years ago. So, not only the store that the site sits on, but also the car park site. Now, across the road, which anyone who's local will know, is the site that Coles occupies, which was sold in March last year by Blue Chip, local business company, for in excess of $80 million. Now, they've also, since that time, bought up the adjoining sites, which are in green. So you'll see that the red is the roadways and laneways, which intersect the areas that now Coles own. So if Coles purchase those red areas, the road and the laneways, they will have pretty much almost 2/3 of the whole car park site to Carlisle Street in their hands to develop a project. Can you hold questions till
I just want to know what the names of those roads are.
they're not roadways, they just simply indicate who owns what. So the green I've written on there, owned by Coles, and the red is owned by City of Port Phillip, and the orange is owned by Woolworths, and the blue is the Tesoriero family. And the unmarked areas indicate we don't know who owns. Now, this is not a professional piece of work. This is an anecdotal piece of work of what we've been able to collect, talking to traders and various other people about who knows what. And there's many of the people in the room who've told me, you know, this was sold lately. There's a lot of title searches to be done to find out who's done what. But you can see that, for instance, the Tesorero's arcade, where the pizza shop is, and the butcher shop is, and we've noticed the mobile shop repair has left, and the barber has left because they could only get short-term leases. So we've seen some changes happen almost overnight because they've got a new owner. If you put your name down on the list, we'll be able to send you some material which gives you a bit of an idea about who knows what. We'll keep you informed. So if you want to stay involved in, as a community about what's going on, please give us your email addresses so that we can keep in touch with you. There are two categories, one that wants to be involved or just being kept informed. So this is also, and I just need to inform you about, in 2018, Council undertook a substantial site investigation report. This is a 155-page report of soil contamination, groundwater contamination, historical land ownership patterns for the whole area, and also planning controls. This is a substantial and expensive piece of consulting work undertaken by council. This is usually the sort of work that a developer does for sites. So this has been done on the public first. Just letting you know, there's an enormous amount of detail and information there. I think there were core logs where they drilled probably about 40 core logs, which is substantial in this area. So, of course, like you, I said, hell's bells, what does this all mean for us? And how do we, what are the risks? We were hearing about from the ACCC about land banking. Is this what's happening in Balaclava? We've got land banking by Woolworths, we've got land banking by Coles. Or do we have a serious development proposal, and what is it? But also, how do we make sure that the sorts of amenity that we are hoping and the aspirations that are shaped in the structure plan of 2009, updated in 2011, can be secured? That's my question. That'll be your question. Do we end up with a wedding cake development like we've seen in other places, such as Huntley Road or other places? So how do we make it all work with the partners that we're likely to be involved with, such as Coles, into the future? So what I did was write a letter to the CEO, and I got kicked downstairs to the General Manager of Infrastructure and Operations, who responded. Now I'll just tell you what he told me, and this is the sort of things that I would suggest that you do too. He said that if you want to become involved, you should get yourself onto the register, have your say on the Port Phillip site. And that there will be public consultation, but it'll be happening over November and December, which is the holiday period, Christmas time. And that there will be a public notice in the Age, and there'll be something on the council website. So we need to help each other to keep informed, I think. That's the way to do this. Coles has shared a preliminary concept plan to council to argue the case for why they should be able to buy the site so that they would be the appropriate purchasers of the site. We haven't seen any of that, and we understand it's very preliminary. So the question is, how about a land assemblage stage? What do we need in place before we as a community are comfortable with who gets to run the project? What sorts of instruments do we need in place to make sure we end up with what we're hoping for in this part of our work? Other speakers will talk to how that could happen and how it hasn't happened because of some failures. Then the officers were told there'll be a minimum of 28 days given for consultation. So you've got 28 days to make submissions. This is the most important bit, that the public interest that we all care about, articulated in the Precinct plan, which is a structure plan, would be secured by Coles substantially addressing the key transaction objectives that council had previously endorsed. Now, I couldn't find those key transaction objectives on the council website. I did search, but maybe you're better than me at finding what they are. And that they rely heavily on environmental, social, financial and economic aspects and draw substantially from the structure plan for the precinct. So everything's hanging off the structure plan, and it will be an instrument called a Section 173 agreement instrument attached to the transaction. Now, other speakers will talk to you about what that is, but a Section 173 agreement is a pretty, we're hanging a lot on this Section 173 agreement to get what we want to achieve out of this holiday. I'll leave it there, and I hope I'm inside my 10 minutes, and Justin will tell me what I'm going.
Thanks, Jerry, very much. So just quickly, if you have questions, just hold your questions till the end, because we are going to have a Q&A at the end, so there'll be 25 minutes for you to ask those questions that you have at the top of your mind, so keep them in mind. I'd like to welcome to the stage Dara O'Brien.
Over there. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
It's a very big crowd. Jerry asked me to turn up here tonight just to speak, because we had some experience together around the Arden Collie Precinct development, which, and I thought I'd turn up. There. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
It's really tall there. Okay. So the purpose of this, we had a similar kind of experience at Arden Collie where the council put forward a structural plan. There was the intentions of the plan were to have activated street fronts, to have permeability, to have urban space for use by the members of the public, etc. So all of the aspirations of the structural plan, which came out of the urban design process of the City of Melbourne, were all good. The problem, as we were concerned, is that there didn't seem to be any mechanism to achieve those outcomes, because if you're not familiar with the process, council produces a structure plan, that goes into then a planning scheme amendment, and then that captures key components. But generally speaking, that's height, use, and street setback, and that's it. So out of concern, we set up a working group with local developers who had interest and own the land, with local community members, with the council. Pretty much everybody was involved. We even got to the point where the proposal in Macaulay Road was for a 6-story development limit, and we as a community said, look, if we can get better amenity, we're willing to engage in what we call an amenity trading scheme. We started to go, right, go 8 stories further back, and you can get 2 extra stories if we can develop the process where the community can benefit from that. And height isn't the issue. Population alone isn't the issue. Amenity is everything in urban design. And that was all great. So it was unanimously approved by the council, it was unanimously approved by the community. It all went ahead, and then, I'll show you what actually happened. So this was what was produced for, the section that was produced for before and after as part of the structure plan, basically showing 6 stories, 2 trees, and cars. And looks very familiar to your own structural plan over this end of town, albeit lower on the street and set back further. But once again, the definition, which is really interesting for us when I found out at the time, City of Melbourne's definition of an activated street front is 70% glass. That's it. That's what activation means to the City of Melbourne. Here, for example, looking at this structural plan, again, you have similar aspirations for open space, for activated street front, for permeability. These are all familiar terms we come across again and again. And they've even gone and produced slightly more elaborate diagrams and urban design plans for where that might occur. But then there's this. These are the images from the structure plan of what an urban design aspiration should be. Some street frontage and some furniture. This is part of the problem, because we don't have a discourse in this city about what it is to activate an urban centre. What do we need in order to create more vibrant communities, not less? So, this is halfway through, since 2011, there's 3 main buildings in Carlisle Road, and this is what we now have. Basically, the buildings themselves are fine, there's nothing particularly wrong with them. There's also the fact that it is in a flood zone, so everything is half a metre or more above the streetscape. But effectively, this is the street by day. This is the activated street front. And this is the permeability issue. So basically what was on the structure plan as permeable laneways is now service roads and locked off footpaths for use of private tenants. So this is, as what our concern was, we were going to have these massive urban blocks of brick and mortar with no permeability, no functions whatsoever, no benefit to the community other than the increased population. So some of the local businesses will benefit, but that's it. The buildings themselves, that piece of city, does nothing for the community. In case you're wondering if it's more active at night, it's actually worse at night. So literally nothing happens in this part of the city right now. There's a second site, which is similar to what you told. This is the Woolworth site. And again, this was supposed to be activated street front with some apartment developments and first floor and a clinic of office and workplace. The entire street frontage is inactive. This has been developed for 5 years now. Never once has any of that glass front been leased out. Not a single activity. All you have is car parking access, service access, truck access on a main busy road. Nothing else. So, we would argue there's a better way. There has to be a better way. The problem is that we don't seem to connect our urban design processes, which City of Melbourne has, which City Port Phillip has, with our planning scheme amendment process. So neither of the two speak to each other, and the former is not captured by the second. Every single precinct like this should have a detailed urban design process, whether it be competition, etc., but it cannot be something that is just left to a planning scheme amendment. Looking at this, an example in Berlin, for example, the Guggenheim, what's called the Guggenheim Lab, they have this portable laboratory that goes from center to center. They engage with the community, they discuss what the community needs, they integrate that into the planning scheme process and capture it in visually as well as in words. The problem with the Section 173 agreement is it doesn't allow you to attach anything to it other than the words in it itself. So how do you describe a good urban design specs in a contractual document? You can't. It's just not possible. You can describe its aspirations, and that's it. So I just put this up because quite often we'll see rendered images of happy people in the middle of spaces. But if you look at this, there is a sense, it's not just that. This is an activated space with destination points, opening and closing, allowing people to occupy and move through it, or stop and pause, and incorporating urban design with landscape in an effective way. And I just leave with this one, the site that I showed you was a former site of Vision Australia, and this is the only thing that's left, is the pedestrian sign, which is ironically called Same Blind. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, thanks, Sarah. Just one thing, the section 173 is the mechanism by which council, when they sell the car park land or the roads, that binds the buyer to certain outcomes. And it might be public space, or it might be replacing those car parks with underground car parks that are freely activated. Anyway, so that's the one mechanism here that we're talking about in the sale of the car park land. But right now, we're going to have Danny Bowen come up. Give her a hand.
There really is a lot of people here. That's fantastic. I don't actually have a PowerPoint, but there is a picture of me. And then there's another picture of me that Justin put together. But let's leave it on that slide. I feel like we do have an expert speaking tonight. I'm an expert in eating, so that's why I'm here. And I'm a food journalist. I don't know, I've been doing it for more than 20 years, covering restaurants all around Melbourne. I'm also a resident of Ripponlea. Feel deeply invested in Carlisle Street. My kids went to kinder, or childcare, kinder and primary school, all within a few steps of Carlisle Street. Over the years I've even done my banking on Carlisle Street. Can't do that anymore. I used to buy my meat on Carlisle Street. Can't do that anymore. Might have even bought a magazine on Carlisle Street. Well, you can't do that anymore. Change, of course, is not always bad. We can agree that things need to move with the times, and of course we're all shopping and living differently than we were when I moved to the area 22 years ago. But you can see on that slide the Carlisle Street Crawl and Bite, which was a collaboration between Melbourne Food and Wine and the City of Port Phillip. And I think it showed, my experience last night with 35 guests from a lot of locals, but people from all over Melbourne, was the potential and the opportunity of Carlisle Street, but also some of the things that it's missing. So this food tour sold out straight away. And I've hosted these tours for Melbourne Food and Wine all over the city. They're always fun. I remember I did one in Seddon, and there was a Tarago full of ladies who came from Albert Park to that one, and they excitedly told me that it was the first time they'd crossed the Westgate Bridge. So that was a good one. No one had such exciting tales about how they got to Carlisle Street last night, but it was a great night. There was 35 people. We started at Charlong, should point over that way, which is a 30-seat Thai restaurant run by two women. It's their first business. I think, one of the things I do love about Carlisle Street is that it seems like a great place for people to have their first business. It's that a lot of those entry-level premises, which I think are so valuable. The business that left that site, where Charlong now is, it was Southall, an Indian restaurant, and they've now moved to a larger site in Hampton. So it's sort of like found their feet there and then, stepped up to the next business. I think that's just a really lovely hospitality story. We then walked down the street a bit further to Rufio, which is one of a few businesses in that little bit of Carlisle Street opposite the town hall, where you go upstairs to dine. It's gluten-free, Latin American, you sort of sit on the deck. They covered it over last night, but you can have it open in summer. And we ate a Venezuelan corn pancake with delicious braised beef and a pickled chili, which was a bit spicy for some people. There was also a passion fruit margarita, which everyone agreed was pretty good. We then left, and at this point, I sort of lost control of my group. They raced ahead of me, and I had to almost jog to keep up with them as they headed to Moon House. So on the corner of Nelson Street, Moon House, which I think a lot of locals still fondly remember as Ilona Stoller. Well, I get it, aww. But Moon House is great too. I think that's another example of a really stunning deco building. It's been, I guess, locally owned for a long time. And that's a group, mostly Southside restaurant group, commune group, which has 6 or 7 restaurants. I think this was maybe their 5th or 6th business that they opened. So really experienced players coming in and really adding something to the street. But yeah, this losing control of my group, that is because at that point when you cross Chapel Street and head down Carlisle, especially 7:30 in the evening, it just feels like this tunnel at Carlisle Street. Like, people are just, there's nowhere to sort of, as we're talking about these throughways and byways, there's just sort of nowhere to meander. It's just like this channel, and people are sort of racing off, and I jogged to get in front of them, and we ended up at Moon House and had a great time. And then, about 8:30, the tab had run out, so people started to disperse, and I walked home to my place in Ripponlea, again, in a little bit of a huddle, looking over my shoulder. I've had some interesting experiences on Carlisle Street, as perhaps some of us have, with the social justice crisis that is part of our neighbourhood, and which is, a very big question, which I think any development questions also need to incorporate. But one of the things I love to tell the group about was one of my latest discoveries on Carlisle Street, which was a Congolese pop-up called Malewa, which is at Glass Merchants 3 nights a week. Does everybody know about that?
No.
Yeah, I know. They've been there for a year, and I only just discovered it. It's my review in the Sunday Age this weekend. It's not a plug, it's just information. But that's a mother and a son arrived in Australia as refugees in 2012. They came to City of Port Phillip to do this pop-up. They can't afford to, have their own space, but they're, making use of a space that's unused at night. And they're really building their dream. They've got big dreams about where Central African food could get to in Melbourne. And they chose City of Port Phillip because they see it as a really diverse community that is interested in things that are different and interested in learning about the new. And I'm so grateful to them for, trying their luck here amongst us. I really love Carlisle Street. I'm actually had chills hearing about some of these possibilities, and I know that part of Kensington, and it's chilling. How sad, but they can probably tick it off because they've got their 70% glass. It is ridiculous. I think, I feel like there must be ways to describe what good development feels like, and as a writer, I would love to try to do that. And I think I'm doing this ongoing series for The Age called Eat Streets. And with that I explore and celebrate neighbourhoods, and there are ways to describe what makes neighbourhoods feel good. I don't have the language of a developer or an architect or an urban planner to know, how to describe it in those terms, but in terms of how it feels as a resident, as a diner, and as someone who believes in the importance of community, I think there is language for that. It's interesting that you mentioned Eastland, Jerry, because, do you think that's pretty good, right? Yeah, like,
Process.
You could, Ringwood, I even go to Ringwood to eat. And I think when you get to Eastland, you can feel that there is process there. It's one of the places I was going to mention as a successful example from my perspective of urban renewal, where the library's there, the childcare's there, the station is there, the life that people want to have or that they need to have, that's not just about commerce, is interwoven with ways to spend money. And I think especially in Balaclava, where I think we want to be a diverse community that welcomes and looks after people who, have any amount of money in their pocket. It's really, really important to interweave those different ways of looking after people as well as providing them with goods and services. So I'll just finish with a little anecdote. By the way, it's Rosh Hashanah, it's Jewish New Year. I was at a lunch today after going to shul, so Shana Tova, everybody. If you want to engage in Jewish New Year, and you could just dip an apple in some honey and wish yourselves a sweet New Year. But there was a little conversation around the table at lunch about were you a Coles Elsternwick person or a Coles Balaclava person? And my bestie that I was sitting next to, we both agreed that we were Coles Balaclava people because Coles Elsternwick is frightening to us. It's too big, it's too shiny, it's too overwhelming, and it's too other. It doesn't feel like it's part of our community. Whereas Coles Balaclava, for all its interesting foibles, feels like us, right? It's like we see one another there. We know the illogicality of the layout. We know where not to step in the car park. So we can probably all agree that we want to see some changes, but I think we definitely don't want to live in the bright and shiny. We want to co-create a community that works for all of us.
Thank you very much. And now, Carlisle St.
Hello everyone. First I'll give a little bit of introduction of who I am. I'm Colombian, and if you were wondering about the corn patty, it's called an arepa. I would say it's Colombian, but Venezuelans probably debate that. I'm an urban designer, and I work with, in the last couple of years I've been working with City of Melbourne and then also with City of Canberra. And now I'm working with MGS, and I've been working mostly in something called design governance and what we would also call, sorry, I forgot to start my presentation there, design governance and design excellence. So I wanted to start talking, just introducing this, because some of the people that we're going to have, we gave a great introduction of why we need that and what are the tools that you can do that you can introduce to really position the role of council in achieving good outcomes for sites. For a long time, councils have stepped away from being active developers of the land. They rely on conversations and steering the process and making sure that all the actors involved really get something in return, but also contribute something. And that's based on the idea that a site doesn't have inherently attached to it a development rights. That's something that we all build together through contributions, through generations of people building in the neighborhood, contributions from business that are in place, and naturally when a site is going to be developed, we have an interest to have a conversation about what we want the site to give in return. So how does council usually steer that process? It does it in two ways mainly, either facilitating, so the council is of course politically very well positioned to help a development happen. So it will facilitate land acquisition, technical knowledge, expedite the process, for example. But it can also have another role, which is put conditions to how actors get what they want. And naturally, all the actors involved, developers, for example, will have a baseline of what they want to achieve or in terms of return, or the minimum that they can achieve, and their aspiration. Residents will have the same, what kind of expectations they have in terms of public space that they want to get out of the site, permeability, and also have a baseline of how much they're willing to accept, which is could be 6 stories next to their residence, but they can also push that to maybe I can accept 8 in return to achieving those aspirations. So council wants to steer that conversation to make sure that we get the best outcomes that serves everybody, right? And in order to do so, it is kind of depends of a political ambient, a political policy environment, how well positioned they are financially, and also the conditions of the site. And we know right now that we have pressure in housing. A lot of that power in council is kind of slowly being eroded and moving to state that is actively trying to fix the affordability crisis. However, it's important that council remains an active participant and uses every tool that they have to steer the process. And that is, for example, with site ownership, of course, that's a very good example. But also through a lot of diverse tools that you can position that company, for example, a structure plan or design guidance that you already have in place. So first, it's important that those tools are hopefully very fresh, but also that you complement it with other tools that exist. And I'll give 2 examples. These are international examples, but there exists some reference locally, and I'll just talk a little bit about them too. So this is the Balaclava model. This is a site that was redeveloped large site that was redeveloped in Sweden. And it's a design competition, so again, thanks for the introduction to that. That's one of the tools that you might use to complement something that is very dry and not specific enough about what is a good design outcome. And what they did different in the Balaclava model is that they sold the land through a combination of a financial return that they wanted to get in the site, but also pledges that anybody that wanted to buy the land could pledge with their financial consideration how much affordable housing they will be returning, how they will achieve better sustainability for the site, how they achieve better design outcomes, and many of these outcomes you couldn't just put in writing. They would have to go through a panel that will judge them, and that gives again power to the architect to be the one that decides what is a permit, an activated facade. Again, so it's not something that is just scripted in a 70% of placing, but it can be something that you will require an architect or a designer to help you, and that gives again power to the architect that has a very different interest from a developer and balances the powers through that process. The second example that I wanted to talk about was Hausstatistik. This is an example in Germany where I wanted to bring this example because it's a grassroots example of what you in the audience can potentially be involved in, and it started from a collective of artists and residents that put together a vision for a site and successfully lobbied the council to make them a co-leaseholder for the development of the site, and that way the council was able to sell the land, but it would have somebody represent, kind of created a vehicle organization that would represent also the interest on for the site to still develop affordable housing, a lot of the kind of community facilities that people wanted, some of the problems that they have, for example, with lack of affordable retail, and that worked successfully in this example. So these two examples again are international, but they're also very local. We've had competitions, they're new, but they're also old. Design competitions have been a big part of Australia. It's well known. Probably one of the biggest, most well-known design competitions in the world is the Sydney Opera House. And here we also been seeing a lot of other councils starting to consider this much strongly. For example, the City of Melbourne, while I was working on the competition design guidelines, because the city is actively trying to make sure that important sites like this one are going through a design competition process that really helps in steering development and all the things that you cannot really put in legislation because they're not easy to quantify and to put into specific terms. Another thing is about that partnership, land lease, and MES, for example, has been involved with the City of Port Phillip, and City of Port Phillip has a very good history in working with housing associations into making sure that land works really well for everybody. So it could also be a model that can be pursued here through more involvement of the community. Lastly, I just wanted to recapitulate about some of those, what you might want to make sure that you get in the site. And basically, we of course want to make sure that the development happens soon. And it's important that there's transparency of what we want from this site before it gets sold, because if you don't do that, then it creates unrealistic expectations of what you can get both for the developer and for the community. And then immediately it can steer into an adversarial relationship that will take longer for the land to develop. So a more transparent process and a more having more clarity from the beginning of what the community wants to achieve is key to making sure that from the moment that the developer buys the land, there's a shorter time, there's a lot of certainty of what can be achieved, and a shorter time before they get the return, which benefits everybody, including the developers and the community. Thank you.
Thanks all four speakers, that was fantastic. So we have the spirit of Andrew Boyne here with us in these slides, the last few slides. I'll just go through these and then we'll go into the Q&A, and then we're going to hear from the local candidates about what they would do in Carlisle Street, if they're willing to say that. Andrew, we asked Andrew in our early development here, what are the things that we could do as a community and as the council to revitalise Carlisle Street? What does it need to thrive? And he gave us these answers here, more foot traffic and an overall shopping experience, tackling retail vacancy rates that we have at the moment, and council has put in place differential rates that encourage landlords to put those empty shops back on the market. So that's something that is being tackled. Stronger representation of the cultures that we have in this area. We heard from Danny these different pop-ups that represent the breadth of our community here. Lastly, attract the demographic here, families, what does our community look like? And support the curation of tenants, like going out actively and seeking tenancies that will themselves bring vibrancy to the street. And I'd just like the note here at the end, not tobacco, gambling, entertainment, and vape stores, which I know we've had challenges with. So thank you for Andrew for those, and thank you for the clap for Andrew. How council can achieve these things. So these are the tools, the levers the council has from Andrew. Reducing the red tape and reducing costs, trying to deliver community outcomes, engaging directly with the landlords, i.e. not the tenants, but the owners of those properties to facilitate them being leased out, and developing a business case for the entire street, like supporting the street and the precinct more widely. Next one here with this. Nodding. So we also talked, I think Danny mentioned here, the social issues that we have. We have challenges on Carlisle Street, everyone knows this. Port Phillip has its Port Phillip Zero campaign to house unhoused people, and that has been very successful, but we still have very hard challenges with a lot of people who still are unhoused, a lot of people with dependency or mental health issues as well. And these are challenges that we can't ignore. You can't police your way out of them. We need our council to keep doubling down on these social services that will allow us to all enjoy our city that we live in, and also live here safely and have secure housing. Lastly here, what is the impact in the timeline? We spoke about this. The impact of these redevelopments, as Andrew says, is going to be enormous, but it's a long way away. Like the Coles redevelopment here is at least 4 years away. So we need council to act in the next 4 years in this period in between there to kind of support the street, to support our local community, while also working on accelerating these developments however we can, whether it's Woolworths, whether it's Coles. So that collaboration between us, the community, council traders and the community is going to be critical here. We have time now for a panel with our speakers here. So I'm going to do two things here. First, I'm going to ask the speakers up in just a moment, so chill out for just a tick. What I want you to do, you probably have a bunch of questions here. So first off, before we all get up, and when we ask a question, I'm going to ask people to come up front. There's a mic up here with the question, right? And I have a few rules here. First, no statements. If you come up here and make just a statement about something, I'm going to send you out and home. So don't do that. Make sure it's a question. And to prepare us, we're going to take 1 minute here. If you have a question or in your head, talk it over with the person next to you and see if this is something that needs to be asked here. Is it something that's a pressing question, right? So take a minute to do that, or something new you learned here that you didn't know before. Talk that over as well. And then at the end of the minute, we're going to come up here, form an orderly line, and we will get your questions answered. So talk it over with your neighbours right now. Last thing, we're going to be circulating sign-up forms for your email addresses to stay involved or informed about what's happening here. So they'll be circulating as well. So turn to your neighbours, talk over something you've learned or something you want to ask. And
What's the question? What do you do about the people who are sitting outside Woolworths, drinking alcohol and smoking cigarettes?
Well, the issue with Coles being shut too, mate, it's going to make everybody cruising in the car park up there. There's going to be parking issues. People come to Carlisle car park. I remember having a brand. Underground car park. There's only many people. There's only many people in so much. I'm very, very sorry. I don't think there's someone involved. they spend on making a bit of money to get out of training rather than sitting in the street.
Good idea.
They have all these stories. It's healthy for
So you could turn around the infrastructure into a community centre.
well, they were talking about actually move on the council is actually the area in Lowy and like down for Lowy and look down towards Cole. Yes, at the moment it's up on the council.
Good idea.
If you are a speaker, I've lost my speakers. I've lost some of my speakers. We have the first question. Actually, the first question, you guys can chill for a minute. The first question is from Jane, and she's going to ask it now.
Oh, listen, this is what I want to ask. When I was on the council, which was for 8 years, we had a couple of briefings on those sites, and it was during structure plans and so on. And the advice from the officers was always, it was really important for council to hold on to that, so it could influence future development. And I was really amazed when I heard the land had been sold and was being sold, and all the advice we're getting tonight is when you've got to own the land to have any influence on what's developed. So I'd really like to know if the council actually had ever been briefed on that site before that matter came to
The question is, the previous advice was council needs to hold on to the land to influence development. What was their advice?
How did it come about that the officers recommended that the land be sold?
I'm actually going to hand this one to Tim Baxter here, representing the council embodied, but he showed up, so that's something.
That's right, yeah. I'm not really representing the council, I'm just the only councillor in the room, that's all. Look, so we did get briefings on this, and just as a point of governance, the decision that was made at council to commence the process to sell doesn't mean that the sale has been completed, and it does not mean that the sale would be undergone without any conditions. It just means that we're going to start the process to sell. We're going to sell to Coles because there's really no one else to sell to. If we did sell it to anyone else, they'd just sell it to Coles. But there's no contract yet, nothing has actually happened, no sale has been undertaken. And in fact, that decision of council, if we wanted more time, could be pushed back, could be deferred. So it's simply that thing saying this is the direction we want to go in, but the actual shape of that direction hasn't been taken yet. Now, there can be many more questions about, well, why didn't we know about it and stuff like that. I think they're all valid questions, but just that's what's happened so far. The sale has not occurred, and it won't occur until a contract and a Section 173 agreement has been developed. And that won't happen until this very light-on consultation process is completed.
Does anyone from the panel want to speak to that as well?
Thank you, and I think there's another question coming from one of the questioners about, if I may, a second speaker there, she was asking, can it be reversed? Now, this is a really good question for Tim, who was one of the councillors who agreed to this recommendation. Coming from the property part of council, there were no strategic planners or urban designers who prepared the report for council. There was no notice to anybody who lives anywhere near the site, so I didn't know that this was coming up before council. So when Tim says that this is a recommendation to start the process, it means that there is a process, a formal process under the Act to go through. What it means is that there's an obligation under council's own policy and also the Local Government Act to consult. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm a bit sus about consult, because often that means we'll go through the motion. It's called tick the box, and thank you very much, we've heard from you, and then we'll just ignore you and we'll proceed. If that's what it means, I'm extremely unhappy, and I want the new council to be aware that all of you care about this, and we're all going to be very vocal about it. We demand a proper process, a proper consultation, a proper design guidelines, maybe even one of the models that Carlos has talked about, so that we end up with a bloody good development, the sort of place we all want to live, that new people who want to come to this area want to live, not these desert wastelands that we've seen in Arden, Macaulay and all sorts of other places. So I asked back to Tim, who is maybe another councillor in the next new council, but every other councillor, a prospective candidate, to answer where you stand on this. Are you going to support us, the community, on making and shaping the process?
We might leave it to them to the end.
Just to that earlier question about whether it can be stopped, the motion could be rescinded because it hasn't been fully actioned yet, right? So the contract hasn't been signed. So if for some reason the new council feels like we're going in the wrong direction here, it could actually be reversed at this point.
Please be aware, you need, as we needed for Ringwood Transit City, we needed big players. To make change, you've got to have big players playing nice. So in the case of Ringwood, we had CIC who kicked in 500 million or 650 million in the end. And they were important partners in the process. You would never have had the sort of outcomes that have happened there. So, not necessarily the enemy.
My name's Peter. I've been a resident here for nearly 40 years. My question is that I've seen developments come and go over the years. The one down at the Triangle site came and went and went and went and went, and it's still what it was 20 years ago, which is a car. However, thank you so much. My question, very quick question, is that...
Send you home.
Okay, my question is that a lot of the talk's been about the coal site, but used to be the Woolworths bought the car park behind the Woolworths site 4 years ago. Are there any plans to develop that site, or is it still just land banking?
Okay.
We can't answer that, that's it.
No, so Tim, well, we can talk about what's on the record. So at the council meeting, the one where this was discussed, the council officers indicated that there are penalties in the Woolworths contract. Woolworths are accruing penalties at the moment for not developing that site, but I don't know if there's any more information. But sorry, Tim. Yeah. Sorry.
This is one thing, yeah. So they pay us extra money every year that they don't develop that site. The problem is there's a cap on that amount of years, and I think it's 5, and I think we're nearly there. So that's a massive stuff up, I believe, in that cap wasn't high enough. Going forward, you wouldn't want to do that again, I think.
Live and learn, sadly. All right, next question.
Hello, my name's Paul, been a resident of Balaclava for 8 years. A quick question, you talked about the really bad developments and maybe one big development which was good down in Ringwood, but on the scale that we're looking at, the examples in Macaulay and Elstonwick, we all agree are terrible. Have you got an example of one that is not terrible?
Can I go to Dara or Carlos here on something good?
In Melbourne, as one worked in Melbourne.
Dara first? No, it's not.
Look, there are smaller developments around. I think there was similar kind of level of development in Mooney Ponds, which is actually a lot more thoughtful, more pedestrian friendly. It's been well considered as a structure, building massing, access, permeability, etc. They're not the best buildings in the world, but as an urban design, you might be familiar with those.
Not one of that scale again, but I think that large sites that have a lot of interest and participation, like for example, Collingwood Yard, is a very interesting way and deliver on the design quality that you would want to see in a place like this.
So I just want to think, well, we do talk about the bad developments. I mean, the irony is that the difference between a good development, good urban design, and bad urban design is not a huge amount. It's not actually even a more costly exercise. It's just about the effort that's put in at this stage of the process and the mechanisms that are put in place. So are there going to be a design competition, for example, for those public spaces? Is that going to be a mandatory requirement for any development of the site, not just giving it to one architect And maybe there's a team, there's a group, there's a series, there's lots of different urban design initiatives around the world, if not in Melbourne, where this has happened, where there have been design competitions for areas and then individual sites are developed by developers, but they come with a predetermined idea about the public realm that's going to be around their site. And the irony is also the benefit to the developers in the end is they can get a premium for these sites because they actually have not just a one-sided street front, but they have 4 or 3 different sites. So this is the thing that always amazes me, and what I'd love to know a bit more in speaking to councils is, why are we failing here? Everybody wants the same outcome. The developers want to make more money, the community want more activated spaces, the retailers want people coming, and yet we keep doing this. Why are we failing?
I just one success story. One success story for the City of Melbourne was actually Carlton. We don't go to Lygon Street and see a dirty great big supermarket because it's buried at a lower level.
Yeah.
We see Brunetti's, we see the theatre, we see the activated streets, all the rest of it. So that was a well done development. That's everybody knows that. That's true.
I don't know, having recently done a story on Lygon Street, not everyone would agree that it's working in all ways. But anyway, setting that aside, I think from my research doing the EAT streets, the good streets, and I'm thinking of Clayton Road in Clayton, Coonang Road in Carnegie, Watton Street in Werribee, they're not necessarily new developments, but I think what they've all got is train stations really close by, so we've got that, and they're over, a lot of them are the new super stations. We don't have that, but I think Balaclava Station shows a lot of potential. But what they do have is the supermarkets are behind, not visible from the streetscape, and there are just a lot of small shops that are very diverse. And the retail and the food is very layered, so there's a real, there are old businesses that have been there for decades, and there are a lot of new business. So I think, Coonang Road is so great, just in terms of it really showcases the different waves of migration that we've been, lucky to have in Melbourne. I don't know exactly how they've managed to do that. I know they've got a pretty strong traders association, but it just feels vibrant and it feels like it tells a story. You walk along that street by day or by night and there's a narrative to it.
Which is what our street used to be like.
Yes.
It was beautiful.
How do you get Coles and Woolworths to go back?
We can use this process to do that. So that's why we need to stay involved as a community, right? These are what we want out of this outcome. We can't just say this and disappear, otherwise we won't get it. It's Christian.
Hi, my name is David. Our family's been here for about 70 years, third generation with my kids. I live on the street opposite Coles. And I'm a developer, unfortunately, I apologise, but I do a lot of the apartments around here, low rise. And I've got a fairly technical background with Section 173s. I work with Urbis planning and also their heritage advisors, and so I have a bit of knowledge on this side. And my biggest concern with the shops that I own on Carlisle Street on the south side, right across the road, is that there's 2 models that Coles use, and I'm not being derogatory to Coles at all. They have the model that they have in Bay Street, Brighton, and they have the model on Gluhartley Road. Gluhartley Road one, they've made it so there's a great entrance on the front. It gives a lot of traffic that wasn't probably in that part of Gluhartley Road before, and it's, whether we like it glitzy or not, it's been, I imagine, one of their better stores. You have Bay Street, Brighton, where they used to have an interaction onto Bay Street, and they created traffic. They had a lot of competition in pharmacy, food and fruit. So what they did is they closed the one on Bay Street and made an interaction on the back, which destroyed all the retail on that side. So my question is, how do you protect, with all the urban planning, with all the Section 173s, with all, everything, they do the 2 entrances, and then after you guys sign off, how do you protect it so that they don't close the door at the front?
So the question here is, how do we make sure this development protects the rest of the street, enhances, rather than just channeling all of the activity into Coles? Carlos, you want to?
Yeah, that's a very good point, and there's kind of like a risk right now that in the exercise of addressing the housing affordability crisis, we forget about that affordability crisis is in all happening across all of the things that we need in our lives. So especially competition between grocers, between Coles and Woolworths, but also all the smaller players is very important to protect. Again, one of the examples that I think we can bring is Sydney has been doing a lot of really good work with making better laneways. They've been jealous of Melbourne laneways for a long time, and now you could arguably say that the new laneways the best new laneways are actually being delivered in Sydney to a lot of percentness. And that they've been doing that through guidelines, but also through exercising a specific clauses that require that there's a minimum level of activated street edge that is not just glazing, but it's actually a minimum size, and that also is not just because you want the street to feel safe, but also because the tenancy sizes are essential. The variety and diversity of tenancy sizes is essential to hit different price points for people to enter into the market, to test new ideas. A Latin American, for example, like myself, I know quite a few people that have migrated recently and have started business, and it's so hard to find a tenancy that fits your budget to really test an idea. And so they introduced that into how laneways are delivered in Sydney.
So just adding to that as well, there's been quite a lot of really good research done between Singapore University and MIT, and they've in what they call reach analysis, where they've been able to demonstrate that these small micro tenancies actually are more activated, create more activated streetscapes than large floor plate retail, and they also are more sustainable, because if a large floor plate retailer goes bust or disappears, then you have an inactive street for years potentially. So then a lot of the bigger retailers, like Daimaru, for example, one member of Melbourne Central, disappeared, and now Melbourne Central is specifically successful as a business simply because they've gone to micro floor plates for the most part.
Just to bring it absolutely back to home, to local, one of the ways one method for making sure that the sorts of things happen is that we set up a reference committee, an informed reference committee that will work with council during this process. So there's constant feedback into the process from informed members of the community. We had a speaker, Hines, who's an urban designer, who's local in Martingale Street. I am not locally. I can still look around this room. There's half a dozen people who are highly qualified in this area who are locals. We have a last speaker, questioner, developer. People like this, they should be on that reference committee. They bring an enormous bank of knowledge. They also care about the place. But the other aspect of this is, when working with Ringwood Transit City over many, many years, it happened over many years, it was good relationships formed over time to change the culture of development. I mean, CIC are enormous, entities. How do you get them to actually, drink the Kool-Aid and, really get on board with the vision? And they did. They really were interested in a great outcome. And that's part of the process of talking among people, building the capital.
Thanks all three. Next question.
Yes, hello, my name is Adam Price. I've been a resident here for about 40 years. I've been a resident here for about 40 years. Outside Woolworths, you've got people drinking alcohol and smoking cigarettes. So about 200 metres away, some of the empty shops turn that into a community centre or something like that. I've asked the question to Carlisle and the other members of the panel.
Yeah, so this is a question about how we accommodate people and get people off the streets.
Yes.
And does anyone want to take Port Phillip Community Group's community centre? There already is a community centre just on the corner of Chapel Street and Carlisle Street, run by Port Phillip Community Group, so very close by. So I'm not sure that turning shops into all community centres is going to help. I think there are other issues at play here. Tim, not to throw you under the bus on this? Otherwise, it's fine, we can move on.
I think I noticed that you worked that out.
Yeah, okay, thank you. We're going to move really quickly. No more questions, please. We're going to get through these four. Yeah, you can come in. No, come in, and we'll get through these ones real quick.
So it just starts with a statement or a recommendation. If you want to see Coles aesthetic when it's not being held to account, check out the northwest corner of Orong Road and Glenhumbert Road, the outside of the Elston Coles. It's in the front. There's not even glass.
And the question?
And the question is, okay, so I like the idea of a competition. I think that's fantastic. And so we get a terrific design. What guarantee do we get that that's what we get? Because currently in this city, you can have a design and you've got your lovely coloured picture of happy, shiny people having coffee, and then the thing is built and it's unfinished, and the council will not act, the officers say, and you want to take it to VCAT, for example, as we've got down in William Street, and it's, sorry, we can't do that.
Okay, how do we make sure that the vision is there?
I might test this with council as well, but there's several mechanisms. The council could establish a design review panel, for example. That's one option. But also there's the Office of Victorian Government Architect that already has a design review panel. So council could make sure that any development of the site must go through OVGA before it can be accepted. If they, for example, don't have the capacity themselves to set up their own design review panel, that's something that can be put into a planning scheme. It can be attached to a particular site, or it could be attached to a Section 173 agreement. Sorry, Farrell, did you like that?
Just the example that I was bringing of Sweden, that's exactly what they did, was they conditioned those outcomes that they wanted up front in the selling of the land. So whoever wanted to buy the land, they needed to commit to pay a certain amount, but the council was willing to accept less as long as the pledges actually accounted for. They gave the pledges for what the community wanted at equal value to what they would sell the land. And so if you were to not comply with that, that would have a financial impact. So so it creates an impact for the developers.
Now that's not described in words, that's described in design drawings, detailed design drawings. So this is where it fails. So structure plans are a lot of words and diagrams, but when you're talking about locking in the feel and the touch that Danny's talking about, all the stuff that all of the community love, you have to really articulate that in drawings.
So I guess that the answer to that is, if you had a Section 173 agreement that stipulated a few things, because as I said, you can't attach drawings to that agreement, but what you can do is say that you must go through a certain process, and that's a mandatory and legal process you must go through to meet the requirements of the agreement, or you're in default. And so that would be go through the design process, community engagement at urban design, amenity level before you're allowed to actually submit for a planning application. And that could be a limited design competition. There may be a major architect behind the whole project, who cares? That's not really important, to be honest. And then that is what goes forward as part of the planning application.
Thanks all. Thanks. We're just running out of time here. Real quick, you can. Okay, yes.
My name is Stuart, and I've lived in this area for 32 years. Maybe it's a question to you, Danny. And it's up there, it was up there that one of the desires is to have more stylish outlets. And to me, that's got nothing to do with design of the place. You can go to New York and go to a dump. It's there. This is an area that apparently is full of sophisticated people, well-off people, so there should be more naturally stylish shops. In the last year, we had the butcher's wife, and also the other one on Woodstock Street. The meat was superb, and I think the butcher's wife was selling to Francois. It shacked on anything in South Melbourne Market or Brain Market. They're gone. Why? Isn't there the structure here, the socio-economic structure, to naturally support those shops?
Yeah, look, I can't speak to those stats, but I can speak to why you would want to go and shop somewhere. And as someone who is happy to spend money on good meat, I want to also go somewhere where it feels like a fun place to be, where I might see people that I know walking down the street, where easy to get a park, and where there are other things that I want to do there. So I think it's about creating the right mix and creating the right feel. So I don't think it's just the fact that, people are buying expensive homes, therefore you can just put an expensive shop there and they're going to walk into it. I think it's a lot more complex and layered than that.
Yeah, it seems like butchers and newsagents and banks are endangered species, right? So, I don't know that we get those back. Or, but anyway, next question.
Hi, my name's Leah and I've lived in the area for 18 years. I'm also a local architect, and so I know all about good design and bad design, and I also know that with all the intentions of everyone in the community, we all want good design, and I'm sure the council want to put down in their section 173 that good design is important. But I also know that it comes down to the client at the end of the day, how willing they are to come to the party of how they believe, what they prioritise as far as good design. What's Cole's perspective on that? Do we know? Like, do we have, someone gave some examples that there were two different recent ones they can say, but in this particular case, can we get Coles on board right from the get-go and go, come on, this is important?
Well, what we do know, if I could just say, and that's only because we have an informal conversation with somebody within Coles, is that they've engaged Rocky Diamond to do a preliminary design. They haven't put any money towards serious master planning, so it hasn't been created. They want to secure the land ownership before they sink any real dough into it. Now, we may have a different perspective about that. We want them to be in partnership with us, and to participate meaningfully in terms of design work. So that we're sharing the power, if you like.
If only there was a way of forcing them to the table.
I'll keep it short. A resident of 40 years in St Kilda, and I love the place, but it's no longer what it was. I'm thinking of the Greyhound Hotel site. I'm thinking of I was involved in community consultation with the council regarding the tram terminus and demise of Ackland Street. And my question is, having contacted the council in February when Meat Corner closed on the corner of Woodstock, I asked them what they could do, and they said they had no responsibility to promote shop owners to. My question is, I'm sorry, I get very nervous. How do I trust the council? How do I?
Anyone put your hand up who wants to answer this question? Well, actually, let's come back to the candidate, because we might take that one on notice. We'll do Carlisle. You're brave.
That's a hard one for me to directly reply, but to answer. But it's an important question about what this means also for other activity centers, and how it sets a precedent for making sure that if this process goes well, then that's also going to help council in developing other areas and developers. So I know council has been doing a design excellence program, and that has highlighted a couple of places that have been developed well, but it's only single sites. So similarly, I think that this is an opportunity for precisely to establish that trust, and that will help them further in the process, and that needs to be taken into account when you're selling the land. But what is the cost if you don't deliver that trust? So that should be also factored into the process.
Sorry, Helen. Sorry, you a speaker here? You can't. This is stage invasion.
Please allow me to speak. I know some people are going to have to go. If you think that you've got special skills that you could offer for us to start a conversation with the council, could you just put an asterisk on your name at the back? Thank you.
Easy, thank you. All right, last call.
This is an invitation, and it's nothing to do with council, but it's a positive invitation. At the Balaclava Hotel on the 16th of October, a new social venture, new to Australia, funded by our local Bendigo Bank, who are very generous in their funding. We are starting peace meals in the pub. And the purpose of that is to get people who sit in the pub on their own isolated and eat and drink on their own. We're just going to rearrange every fortnight the tables in the pub so that we sit together and share a meal together. So it's on the cheap night, the pub will support in this, and so it's piecemeal in the pub. So we start on the 16th of October. We don't want you all to come, but some of those people who you see on the streets will be there.
Thank you. Very cool.
And one more invitation is that the Carlisle St traders have started a market, and the next one's on the 26th of October, and it's behind the pub, or what's the little lane?
Diana Lane.
Okay, and so if we want some community spirit, please be there to support the market.
Thank you. Thanks very much. All right. If you're a candidate and you want 1 minute to talk to the community here about what your vision is or what you would do. I've got a microphone here. There's one here. Come up. Please, candidates. Libby, yeah, John, you want to go first?
My name's John Wexler, I'm from Balaclava Ward, and my policy in the highly unlikely if I win will be to put CCTV street cameras in Carlisle Street and Riverway Village. They're in Ackle Street and Fitzroy Street at the moment, and they do make a positive impact on personal safety. Thank you.
Let's bring it so everybody can see it.
Hi everyone, and thank you to the organisers for brought us all together today. My name is Libby Buckingham. I'm the Labor candidate in Balaclava Ward. My background is I currently work at the Victorian Council of Social Service, which is the peak body of the community services sector. I lead a team called the Thriving Communities team. And in my experience of working at BHOS, I've travelled around Victoria and I've seen community engagement and community development done well. And I've seen it done well at the local level. And this is really where I was inspired to run for our local council. Over the past few months, I've door-knocked most of Balaclava Ward, and most people I've spoken to on the doors raise the issue of Carlisle Street with me. And I've heard some stories that are pretty sad in this day and age. People that don't feel safe on Carlisle Street. I heard from a trader just this week that they can't have women locking up their shop at the end of their shifts because of concerns around safety. And from my experience working at BCOS, I know there isn't a simple solution. I know that the Coles development isn't going to be a silver bullet that solves all the issues that we are facing. But I also know that when we engage with our community, when we tap in to the amazing expertise and resources that we have in this room and in our streets around Balaclava and Elwood and St Kilda and Riverlane, that we can find innovative ways to address the challenges. And one thing that I took from the panel today is that it's all about relationships. And so this will be my major focus as your local councillor, to build the relationships, to have a council that's engaged and transparent and keeps their hand on the wheel through this process that's going to shape out our community and our town. Thank you.
You're a bit taller than me, Libby. Guys, my name is Jill Mormon and I'm one of the candidates in Armour Ward. And look, a lot of the people in St Kilda East over there do use Carlisle Street, and it's been a hot topic. On my second round of the area, I've been in every single nook and cranny of that area, I tell you what. Me personally, look, at the moment I work at a law firm, I work at Morris Blackburn, but before that I was actually a union organiser for a long time with the retail union, so there's probably not a single Coles supermarket in this state that I haven't been into. Call that a good thing or a bad thing, but I certainly know how to negotiate with a Coles representative if need be. Look, as we prepare for this development, it is essential that we work together to ensure that it meets the needs of this community and promotes safety for everybody. First and foremost, we must be listening to each other. And if I am successful and on council, then the council needs to be doing more things like this. This has been great. And we need to continue doing this all throughout the process. We need to be gathering, we need to identify local concerns and ideas to ensure that the development serves everybody's interests. We also need to work closely with Coles to make sure that they tailor the design of all parts of the development to the style and the vibe of this community. We talk about identifying with a particular supermarket because of its personality, because of its physique, and we need to make sure that as we do this, throughout however many years it takes, that we reduce the delay and hold Coles accountable. Richmond Traders and Burwood Brickworks are two examples I can think of where Coles has tailored a design based on the community's unique vibe. So I do think that it is doable. If you look at those two, they're very different to a standard sort of outer suburban Coles supermarket. So I do think that we can hold them accountable. We just need to be active in that space. And for many of us, safety is a top priority, and I will work with urban planners to design well-lit pathways, entrances, parks, parking areas, and to particularly enhance visibility and to try and deter crime. Traffic safety will also be an opportunity to be addressed. I understand Justin.
Can I wrap you up?
You may. But look, at the end of the day, it is an opportunity to look at sustainability, accessibility for all members of this community. So that's me. I've got a bit more that I can talk about, but I'll shut up.
Thank you. And if your car window is DAB 569, your car lights are on.
Evening everybody, my name is Alex Darden. I'm running as an independent candidate in the ward of Balaclava, so this ward. Now, I'm a chef by trade. I've also owned restaurants before, so small businesses. I don't currently. I spoke to council about this last August because it just seemed wrong. I didn't even know about the laneway underneath the car park until I looked at the plans. I got told off by the mayor there for implying that they were manipulated. But it wasn't that as such. What I meant was it felt weird that Coles were the only ones who would buy those laneways since they were directly attached to it. So it all felt wrong. I don't have the answers, that's why these forums are so important. What I do believe in is more community involvement, and because it affects all of us. So Alex Darden, independent, Balaclava ward, don't have the answers yet, but believe that together we all should. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm speaking on behalf of Rachel Yankowski. She's a Greens candidate for Balaclava ward, and I want to club.
And she has COVID.
And she for real has COVID. She's written a lot though. It's undeniable that Carlisle Street, the heart of Balaclava, is in need of urgent attention and love. A large-scale development in the middle of the street could either help revitalise Carlisle Street if done right, or it could have far-reaching negative impacts such as overshadowing and the sterilisation of the street's morphology and business mix. When I speak with people on the doors, while there is broad agreement that more housing is needed, the fate of this redevelopment on the street and neighbourhood is always a top concern for locals, and I'm right there with them. Not me, Rachel. I mean, I love you guys too, but as an urban researcher, that's Rachel again, focused on how we can better design public places, the outcome of this redevelopment is a top on my priority list also. What else? We must put caveats on the sale of the prize land that helps ensure we squeeze the most community benefit out of the site, including mandatory provision of open space and permeable soil, minimum setbacks to avoid overshadowing, a requirement to build at least 20% affordable housing in the mix, community consultation. Yeah, I'm out of
here. There you go. Well done, Liliana. And if anyone's ever heard an urban planning academic like Rachel speak, it would go on for a lot longer than that, I'm sure, but there'll be so much detail. My name is Tim Baxter. I'm a Greens candidate for St Kilda Ward. Obviously, a lot of people in St Kilda Ward utilise Carlisle Street on a daily basis, and I'm very, very familiar with the area. I'm also an existing councillor, did vote to sell those laneways and those parcels to Coles, because it is my view that there's no one else you can sell it to, but it is my strong view that that sale needs to have those really strong conditions attached. And if through the process that will eventuate with whoever's on the new council, and if I'm on it, doesn't look like it's heading a new way, and we haven't actually signed a contract yet, we can reverse that decision. We can take the extra time that we need to get that right view. In terms of the outcomes on the site, we've talked about social and affordable housing. We've talked about open space. We've talked about activated retail, toilets, parking, those really important things that the street needs. I'm not here to guarantee any particular outcome on that site. One of the problems that I want to draw attention to is that I think the focus in council, in terms of the council bureaucracy and the staff, who do a wonderful job, and they all work very hard, but the focus, I think, is very heavily on asset management, coming from an asset side of things. And those guys are great, they're experts at that sort of stuff. But the urban design side of things, the consultation side of things, the community engagement side of things is heavily lacking, and those are the areas that have been trimmed back by the Conservative majority that wants to bring things in. So I think the next council needs to be actually addressing that imbalance and moving it back to how do we design fantastic urban spaces for our community, and assets are part of that. It's really important for sure, but it should never be the lead part of what we're talking about. Thanks very much.
Now I'm a candidate, so I'm just an independent candidate for our ward. You're sick of me by now, we're going to go home in just a minute. By way of my platform on this, it is first, don't sell the land. We need to use that land. That is a big lever we have to buy ourselves a seat at the table with coal, and use that to achieve the outcomes the best outcomes for the community we can. So stay in the discussion as long as possible by holding off on selling land. Second thing is we've got to bring forward the precinct planning. The precinct plan that we heard about tonight is 15 years old, almost not been VCE, right now, council is about to start redoing the precinct plan for Fitzroy Street. They need to instead do Balaclava first, so that we can get this area, the need revitalisation, have a proper precinct plan so that we can have good siting. Anyway, thank you all for coming. Different hat now. Thank you all for coming. Give yourselves a big clap. Give it up. Thank you all. Don't forget to fill in the sheets to stand off. Thanks all. Go about your lives.
Thank you very much.